On April 22, 1915, near the Belgian city of Ypres, a battle kicked off that would become a terrifying turning point for all of human conflict. I mean, this was the day the very air we breathe became a weapon. The rules of war, they weren't just broken, they were completely, horrifically rewritten.
Just try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. You're in a muddy trench, you're exhausted, and then you see this thing. It's not smoke, it's not dust, it's this weird, creeping, yellowish-green cloud just silently rolling towards you. This quote from a British soldier perfectly captures that mix of confusion and pure dread. They had absolutely no idea what they were about to face.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the stalemate that set the stage. Then we'll get into the unleashing of this terrifying new weapon, see the desperate defense that followed, understand the awful cost of the battle, and finally, we'll explore its lasting poisonous legacy. To really get why this moment was such a game changer, we have to understand the battlefield itself. We have to know where and why this all happened. By 1915, the First World War wasn't a war of quick, sweeping movements anymore. No, it had ground down into this miserable, static meat grinder. You had armies dug into these huge networks of trenches with a blasted no-man's land in between. Any advance was measured in feet, not miles, and was paid for with thousands and thousands of lives. The area around Ypres was what the military calls a salient. Basically, it was a bulge in the Allied line that jutted out into German territory. Now, this made it a really important strategic point, but it also made it incredibly dangerous. The soldiers holding it could be attacked from the front, from the left, and from the right. It was the perfect target for a new kind of weapon.
And it was at this vulnerable spot that the German High Command decided, you know what? We're going to break this stalemate. And they planned to do it by unleashing something the world had never, ever seen on this scale.
Just look at how fast this all went down. At 5 p.m., German troops opened thousands of gas cylinders. 5 minutes later, this toxic cloud is just silently drifting across no man's land. By 5:30, it's completely swallowed the French and Algerian trenches, and it's total chaos. 2 hours after it started, there was a 4-mile-wide hole in the Allied line. It was terrifyingly effective.
And the sheer scale of this, it's just mind-boggling. This wasn't some small experiment. We're talking about 171 tons of chlorine gas. It was industrialized warfare entering a horrific, horrifying new chapter.
The effects on the human body were just unspeakable. What chlorine gas does is it reacts with the water in your lungs to form hydrochloric acid. So it essentially causes a person to drown on dry land, their own lungs filling with fluid. For those unprepared soldiers, it was a torturous, agonizing way to die. So now there's this massive gap in the line. Troops are either dead, dying, or running for their lives. The whole Ypres Salient is about to collapse. What happened next was this incredible mix of pure chaos, desperation, and unbelievable courage. This really paints the picture. The French territorial and Algerian troops, they took the full force of the gas. They were completely unprepared, had no protection, and their lines just dissolved in panic. But right next to them, the 1st Canadian Division held their ground. They launched these desperate counterattacks right into the poison, fighting to plug that hole and stop a catastrophic German breakthrough.
So how on earth did they keep fighting? Well, with one of the most desperate improvisations in military history. On the fly, medical officers figured out that the ammonia in urine could partially neutralize the chlorine. So in the middle of this chaos, this is what they did. Urinating on rags, on handkerchiefs, pressing them to their faces. It was a grim, horrifying solution, but it saved lives.
That first gas attack, believe it or not, was just the beginning. The Second Battle of Ypres would rage for another whole month, and it became a brutal, grinding battle of attrition, exactly the kind of fighting the Western Front was known for. And the price? It was just staggering. The Germans took about 35,000 casualties, but the Allies, in their desperate fight to hold the line and counterattack, they lost nearly double that, around 70,000 men killed, wounded, or just gone. This chart puts it all into brutal, stark perspective. Look at those casualty bars towering over the tiny, negligible amount of territory that Germany actually gained. Tens of thousands of lives were sacrificed for a few miles of Belgian mud. I mean, if you want a picture of the tragedy of the First World War, this is it. So, Why do we remember this one battle out of so many? Because its impact stretched way beyond that battlefield in Flanders. It created a legacy that, well, we're still living with today.
The Second Battle of Ypres basically opened Pandora's box. It kicked off this frantic arms race in chemical warfare. Both sides started developing even deadlier gases like phosgene and mustard gas, and better masks to protect against them. It added this whole new layer of psychological horror to war, this fear of an invisible enemy. And eventually, the absolute terror of it all is what led the world to try and ban these weapons, with treaties like the Geneva Protocol. And yet, somehow, out of all this horror, came one of the most powerful symbols of remembrance we have. The Canadian doctor, John McCrae, he wrote the famous poem In Flanders Fields right in the middle of the battle after a friend of his was killed. Those poppies, which grew so well in the churned-up earth, they became a global icon of sacrifice, born directly from the tragedy at Ypres.
Ultimately, the story of Ypres leaves us with a really heavy question. The gas attack was a technological breakthrough, right? A scientific solution to a military problem. But it was the soldiers in the trenches, unprepared, unprotected, and absolutely terrified, who paid the real price for that innovation. It's just a sobering reminder of the human cost that's always hidden behind the strategies and technologies of war.